time for us to head to or focus on the main issue this morning, which is, looking at the 2018 appropriation bill that was submitted by the President to the National Assembly some weeks ago. Now, it feels like in the past couple of years, it's become a recurrent for there to be a back and forth, between the presidency and the National Assembly, especially when it has to do with the appropriation bill, passing it and, issues with the figures. At some point we heard of a missing budget. At some other point we heard of padding of the budget. And then this time, after the promise that by this time, this year, the 2018 budget would have been ready, if not approved already, to start running from the 1st of January 2018 to make up for all of the mistakes or the delays in the past. But it feels like that's not going to be feasible because it feels like there's just going to be another round of face-off between the executive and the legislature over the 8.612 trillion naira 2018 budget. Now, just on Tuesday, the Senate criticized the presidency, or President Muhammadu Buhari, on what it referred to as a shoddy preparation of the budget, which it hinted will face implementation challenges. Now, they've also had issues with, the defense by ministries, departments, and agencies. And one of the most prominent ones right now is, the one that happened when the Ministry of Power, Works, and Housing came up to defend its own budget. Now, they say it feels like there are duplications of items. Some members of the committee refer to it as a padding. Now, they say stuff that was appropriated for in 2017 still finds its way into the 2018 budget. It just makes it pretty interesting. But just before I go through and just take you on a roller coaster on this one, I'm sure you're really interested in this discussion. Joining me to do justice to this is a former local government chairman, a politician, public affairs analyst, political commentator, name it, Honorable Morrison Oborobovia. Many thanks for joining me this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, and then a lecturer from the University of Benin, Mr. Osareme Felix, will be joining me in just a touch. All right, we're hoping he joins us this morning. But quickly, let's begin. Why has it become an issue? Why has, bickering between the presidency and the National Assembly become, why is it gradually becoming a norm every time an appropriation bill is sent to the National Assembly?
Simple. It's an element of developing democracy.
Okay.
Developing democracy is characterized with lot of abnormalities in its developing stage.
Okay.
But as it gets more matured, more experience, areas like this will be taken care of. Because in a developing democracy, the institutions are not strong. They are growing to be strong.
Okay.
They are growing to be stronger. At the time every institution in a democratic setting, it is strong, you find out that every institution will play its role to ensure that the democracy keeps growing very well. Just like in America. The pattern of democracy that Nigeria operates today is the American model. And today, American is about 240 or 252 years old. You know where they are coming from. They have passed through these hurdles. And today, they now know how things are done appropriately. Because every government institution is very solid and it's carrying out its expected functions. In the case of a developing democracy like Nigeria, we expect to see this kind of daunting times where the House, the legislator will want to exert its authority. The executive arm will also want to play its own, shows its own powers. I don't know if you understand.
Okay.
Then they begin to have some conflicts. But however, for the purpose of growth, well-being, and development of this country, I think we must begin to do things in the right perspective.
Okay. You mentioned, let me just hold you there.
Yes.
You mentioned in a developing democracy.
Yes.
I mean, we have countries in Africa that have younger democracies.
Yes.
Younger than Nigeria.
Yes.
All right. And you don't hear all of this.
No, because
it doesn't happen.
No. It's because Nigeria is the biggest, most populous African nation.
Shouldn't that be the reason why we would do things right?
That is what I'm telling you. That before now, this thing that you see today, it's gradually changing. You understand me? Every institution is beginning to know its functions, its rights, its responsibility. I want to say something. I am happy that the legislative part of the government is carrying out its functions.
Okay.
Because now, people lift elements from the budget of last year to place on this present budget without them knowing that, these people will be thorough in carrying out their job. Now that this has happened, by next budget, those who are responsible in preparing the budget will be very cautious of what they are doing.
Okay.
And that is how growth and development takes place.
Okay. Someone actually said
Yes.
that this 8th National Assembly
Yes.
might just be the most functional of all of the assemblies we've had, especially between 1999 and now. All right, being that this National Assembly has taken time, to do things that normally doesn't happen, especially as it has to do with slugging it out with the presidency, when it has to do with issues on the budget. Now, if you remember very well, one word that was used was the fact that the 2018 appropriation bill was a not well prepared document. I will use the word exactly, shoddy preparation. It was not properly prepared. That's what they're saying. And there is a Minister for Budget and National Planning, there is a Minister of Finance. There are people at the Budget Office whose duty is supposed to be gather all of this from the various ministries, departments, and agencies, and then put it together in something that would be watertight, sent to the National Assembly. They perform the oversight function, look through it, perform their statutory duty, look through it and then pass it. Which, if a proper job was done, we won't have all of this.
Yes, I agree with you. And that is why I talk about institution. For instance, when I was chairman of the local government, the Department of Planning in local government is responsible for putting budgets together.
Okay.
When they brought the budget, prepared budget, proposed budget, I asked for the budget. And I will go through it page by page, item by item. So some persons are saddled with the responsibility of governance, and they do not take pains, to do thorough job. In this case, we have the Ministry of Budget and Planning. We had expected that when they collect the various ministries' budget, proposed budget for 2018, it is the responsibility of the Ministry of Budget and Planning to go through this, document properly. And apart from that, even before the submission of the various ministries' budget to the Ministry of Budget and Planning, every minister, every PAMSEC or head of departments of the various ministries should be able to do their job thoroughly before they submit to the coordinating minister, of course, which is the Minister of Budget and Planning, before they hand over those documents to the presidency, where eventually the president will take it to the National Assembly. So for me, I think it's a strong indication that those who are responsible for putting these documents together did not do their job. But however, I must also commend the National Assembly for also taking pains to go through these documents. And this, of course, will stand as a deterrent for the repetition of such mistake next time. And that is why I say, in summary, this whole process you see, it's element of developing democracy. At the time the institutions are strong, The legislator knows their boundaries, knows their limitations, and they know what they are supposed to do. The executive is now conscious of the fact that the kind of legislators we have now are legislators that are thorough. They will also sit tight, and this, to a large extent, will complement each other to ensure that everybody, contributes its own part in the growth and well-being of Nigeria. It's a collective responsibility, and of course, there is need for a good relationship to transcend between the legislative arm and the executive arm. But however, that is not to say because the legislative arm is there, they will just fold their hand. No, we expect to see a vibrant, viable, functional, and result-oriented legislator to also complement the effort of the executive. If the executive is conscious of the fact that they have a very potent legislative arm, I think it also makes them to stand on their toes to carry out their responsibility as expected.
All right. You mentioned some persons not doing the job properly, which has led to, the documents that the appropriation bill,
Yes.
which the Senate has referred to as a shoddy job.
Yes.
Some persons have also said they thought before now
Yes.
that the presidency or the president, would have rejigged his cabinet, and either switch some people or take off some deadlock, bring in some more vibrant persons with more knowledge about, some parts of the government or some functions of the government. But just quickly, let me take you to something the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, said while she was giving an end-of-year analysis of how the 2017 budget had performed. Now, she said last year, the government released 1.3 trillion naira for capital, and that so far this year, the government has released 450 billion naira. Now, she says, hopefully this week, the government will release another 750 billion naira. If you put that together, it gives you a total of 1.2 trillion naira for 2017. In 2016, it was 1.3 trillion naira. If you ask me, or if I ask, is this how a budget should work? Shouldn't it get better by every year? Should the people not get, if we got, dividends, capital expenditure is supposed to take care of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that's dividends for the people that voted the government in. Yes. So if 2016 gave us 1.3 trillion naira worth of projects, and then this year we're just doing 450 billion, 750 about to be released. I'm not sure yet.
Yes. Well, first, when your budget itself is a proposed expenditure, and this expenditure is carried out based on the availability of funds.
Okay.
Before now, Nigeria operates a mono economy. The mono economy is dependent on oil. Oil prices is regulated by OPEC.
Okay.
Nigeria does not have the direct control of oil prices. If there's a fall in oil price, it automatically affects the financial status of a country, especially a country that operates a mono system. You understand me?
Yeah.
Now, in this situation, oil has dropped drastically, and the influx of finances that will be put together before it is being released will now be affected.
Oil has done better this year than it did last year.
But what is the benchmark?
Okay.
What is the benchmark? It is gradually pulling up. But what we are saying is, let us not depend only on oil. Nigeria has grown beyond a mono-economic system. We should operate a diversified economy where there will be availability of resources to carry out what has been placed in the budget. But if these resources are not available, how then can you execute projects that are in the budget? It's a fundamental area we must look at. The mono-economic system is the major factor.
Well, the government has done a whole lot with diversifying the economy. Actually.
Yes, and of course you know that the areas that today's government is interested in is agriculture, which is the quickest and easier way of diversifying the economy. But don't forget, this agriculture we are looking at You must also look at the kind of, agricultural system. Is it cash crop? When you're talking about cash crop, for instance, if you want to invest into palm kernel, rubber, whatever, cocoa, you know that it is not what you get the immediate benefits. It takes a minimum of 3 to 4 years before the benefits of harvesting those cash crops. So within those period, there must be some difficult time that the people face.
Let me ask you a quick question just before we take a break and bring on Mr. Osereme on board. Do you think that statement by the Minister of Finance indicts this government?
Well, she's been professional. She's been professional.
At a time when the National Assembly is already having issues with
Can I say something? Can I say something? Saying the truth sometimes is a little bit difficult. But the truth of the matter is, I want to say that for me, as an individual, if you ask me to assess her, she's just been careful. So that tomorrow, Nigerians, the way we try to lampoon, lampoon somebody, at the end of the day, they'll say she's not competent. She said what was not right, but she's been careful. So you don't think her statement undermines the effort of the Ministry of Budget and National Planning? Have you not said yourself before now that the National Assembly has made a statement that this year's budget was shadily, and wrongly, or was not properly put in place? I mean, you have already answered the question.
All right, let's take a break and bring on Mr. Osereme to join us on this discussion. Just stay tuned. All right, thank you for staying tuned. We continue with our discussion looking at the 2018 appropriation bill as sent to the National Assembly by the President, Muhammadu Buhari. The Senate seems to be having a whole lot of issues, with that document. In their word, they say it was a shoddy job done in preparing that document. Now, that leaves the question, if the promise that was made, by both the National Assembly and the presidency or the executive, to ensure that the 2018 budget begins running from the 1st of January, how feasible that would be, the answer is left to you right now. But then, Mr. Felix Osereme, a lecturer at the University of Benin, joins me this morning. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you and good morning.
All right. Same to you. Same to you. All right, and Honorable Morrison Ogunrobo has been with us since the start of this discussion. We've been looking at the 2018 appropriation bill, trying to look at the issues from the 2017 budget. Now, I'm sure you remember very well, one of the agreements reached when the 2017 budget was passed to begin running from the 1st of July was the fact that at least 40% of that budget will be implemented before the end of the year, and then the rest of the 60% would be rolled over into 2018. Now, one of the issues the Senate is having is the fact that that agreement was not adhered to, in preparing the appropriation bill for 2018. So let me get your stand on that one first of all, Mr. Felix, before we continue looking at the other issues.
Well, the government has a lot on its plate. We agree, and as my co-discussant just mentioned, a budget is a proposition.
Okay.
It shows income and expenditure over a particular time. Then once it is approved, it becomes a law. So it becomes a bill. And now, there's continuity in governance.
Okay.
There is a disconnect between the executive and the legislature in this matter.
All right.
And in democratic practices, it is the legislature that approves expenditure. The legislature also has the capacity to monitor expenditure, what we call oversight function. That is why the budget is presented before it is approved. But it is the duty of the executive to do the presentation and also to implement, while the legislature monitors by their oversight capability. So if you look at it from that angle, the budget started late in 2017, from June. And if the budget had taken off in January, maybe we would be having this kind of argument. It started mid-year, And if you start something midstream, it means the capacity to have full implementation would also be limited. So by normal expectation, you add it to the subsequent one.
Okay.
So the one that will follow therefrom. All right, so in this case, we are talking of 2018 budget when 2017 has not been exhausted. And in government policy, in government cycles, there's what we call closing the budget. That is normally by the end of the year, you retire all leftovers to the account and you now add it to the subsequent year. So that is where there's a problem right now. There is no presentation to the National Assembly by the executive now saying this is what we have not utilized, this is the shortfall, so we want to add it to the new one. They are just presenting a fresh one. So the question now will be, where is the balance of the previous one? Of course, we're in December. So, and it's a proper question. You see, this is the beauty of democracy. The Senate that is even holding its position clear is doing the right thing. Because ordinarily in democracy, if it was military regime, you just do fiat, nobody will ask you any question. And of course, we grew up in Nigeria where on the 1st of January, you see the military head of state telling you this is the budget. Who will ask any question? Nobody. They've decided that is it. But in democracy, it is not business as usual. You have to convince them, you have to explain. Even when they've given you the money, if you need extra, what we call surplus, you have to ask again. It will go through the same process. So there's procedure in this matter. And the procedure is where we have a problem today. You didn't execute something completely. Nobody is asking you to execute it 100%. We are saying, okay, you've tried to an extent because you started late. Now, the leftover, by understanding, you will show us and you will now add it to the new one. But there's no presentation in 2018 budget saying this is the leftover from 2017 that we are going to now build on to continue. And we know the effect of this on the Nigerian economy and society.
Okay. All right. I'm sure you guys would agree with me. The carryover of the 2016 budget into 2017, or over to about April 2017, was what helped Nigeria partly exit the recession that the country had been in for some time at that point, which was actually self-created in some sense, if you ask me. Now, but let's take a look at that 2016 budget where, it was about 6 trillion naira, and the capital expenditure was something around 1.3 trillion, all right, or about 21.7% of the budget. Now, and then look at the 2017 budget where there was a proposal of 7.4 trillion, and then capital expenditure was about 1.2 trillion, or about 16.2% of the budget. And then we're looking at a 2018 in progress. But looking at the year under review right now, which is 2017, my question again is, are we making progress as a nation? Because implementation of the capital expenditure actually shows the level of progress we're making. Are we making progress at all? I've asked that question before. I didn't get a proper answer, so I'm bringing it back to you.
Yes, we're making progress, but the fact is the pace at which the progress is going is very, very slow.
Are you saying
Yes.
progress can be regressive also?
Well, at this level, we will not say it's regressive.
Because that's what it feels like.
No, maybe the percentage...
1.3 trillion in
Yes.
2016.
Can I say something?
1.2 in 2017.
Yes, but any budget that is potent is a budget that has a more percentage of capital expenditure to, recurrent.
Okay.
Because at the level of a budget that has capital expenditure, it simply means that the citizens of that country should expect more of developmental and infrastructure, developmental, physical infrastructure.
Okay.
But in a case where you have a more recurrent expenditure, it simply means that those monies are usually being spent on administrative costs, which to a large extent does not have a direct impact on the citizens of the country. Now, when you look at the 2017 and you look at the 2016 budget, the 2016 budget has more of capital expenditure. The 2017 has more of capital expenditure. At this level, the expectation of the Nigerian citizens will be much. They expect to see more good roads, more healthcare services, more educational facilities functional. You understand me? But in a case where these things are not noticed, the average man on the street will begin to fault the development pace of an administration. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So for me, if you ask me, I will tell you that though the pace of development is slow and steady, you understand me? We need to speak to the government of the day to increase its commitment in terms of, infrastructural development to where the average man on the streets can see there will be job opportunity for the citizen of Nigeria.
Okay, let me ask you, Mr. Felix, is this any way to execute a budget?
Sorry?
Is this by any means any way to execute a budget?
Well,
Trying to match 2016's execution with 2017.
No, normally there is progression. You see, we don't ask for retrogression. Nobody actually plans to retrogress.
Okay.
But it can happen if you do not plan to progress. And as the Honorable here just said, he has been a local government chairman, so he knows what he's talking about. You see, development comes principally from capital projects. Recurrent expenditure is acceptable, yes, but it's short term. If you are talking of long-term progression, it must be in the sector of capital projects. And that is where government has direct impact. Of course, if you were to ask me what is recurrent is mostly about salaries and administrative costs and overheads. How many persons actually work in the government? So you are now saying that we want to turn Nigeria into a civil service economy, which will not help the country. When we're talking of industrialization, you are talking of advancement in terms of infrastructural development. That is where you talk of capital projects. And that is where the government should focus more attention. But as we have just observed, in 2016, a greater percentage was given to capital projects than in 2017. And 2018, there's already contention. So that means we are not making real progress. You see, there can be growth, there's no development. Okay? So there can be motion, there will be no movement. So what we are seeing is more of motion, not movement. And if you want to move, you need to put in place a strategic plan. A government of concerned and projective capacity will ask itself, within this period to this period, what do we intend to achieve? The next question is, how do we achieve it? Then what do we need to achieve it? So these are the platforms that the government should work with. Okay, in Nigeria of today, you are hearing the government bickering over, we've not finished 2017, we brought 2018, there's already argument. Before now, it was budget padding. Before now, it was budget that was submitted, was not the one that was presented. It gives a picture of a society and a government that is not serious in carrying out what is expected. In fact, Nigeria is a theater of absurdities. That, of course, if you tell a child that this is a country, the child will be wondering, is this possible? As if there's a movie that's not probably scripted and is playing before the child. So we can get it right. And interestingly, I've always explained that we did not invent any of these things. There are things that we got because we have now been developed to that point. Of course, we had colonial rule, they taught us budgeting and everything, so they've handed over to us. So we expect that at our stage, you can say, okay, we can plan this. Now, if President Buhari, as the chief executive of the country, with his cabinet, sat down as I says, what do we have in mind for Nigeria? Is this what they actually have? So we begin to wonder what is wrong. There is a disconnect between the executive and the civil society, the civil populace. Sometimes people begin to wonder, do we even have a government? If we have one, why are they not doing the right thing? Because this is we are discussing it now. It is clear to us. But again, let's quickly look at one point. One of the definitions of politics is the authoritative allocation of values. And by values, we mean resources. Okay. People politicize everything. And Nigeria is a country where even the air we breathe is now politicized. So everything becomes political. You begin to argue left and right. But meanwhile, we have the key issue. And as Honorable just mentioned now, what is the key issue here? We want to develop this country. You cannot develop by spending more on consumption, on recurrent expenditure. You develop by putting more into capital expenditure. Yeah. And governments raise money by three major measures. You do internally generated revenue, you ask for statutory allocations, then you take loans and you get grants. So you factor all these things into your budget. Okay. And with this, you can now plan. If the government has not made a proper plan, we would not expect 2018 to be better than 2017. And we are talking of just exiting recession. It's not because we were smart. It's because the international oil price has also gone up.
Okay.
I won't even want to believe it's agriculture because we have not really taken it up. It's
But
only now
agriculture
that
didn't even.
yes,
It
we
didn't,
are just,
it didn't add
agriculture does
much,
not pay off overnight. Agriculture is a long-term
process.
venture. So you have to plan and invest. So after maybe 4 or 5 years, you now see the net effect. But in the short run, it is the change in oil price that has given us that leverage and the ability to also take 1 or 2 advances from the international capital markets.
Okay.
That's what we should be looking at. So the government should be very careful. Of course, as we say, the bubble can burst easily. So we are talking of a government that is at loggerheads with those that should help understand the process of appropriation. The government should even welcome the argument by the National Assembly with open and thank them. Say, okay, sorry, we didn't say this, we can now do better. But when you start grandstanding, as if we are going back to the old era of fellow Nigerians, we have decided. We are not in that stage. We are in democracy. People, we are discussing the same issue now. And there should be a collective to ask, how are people feeling? What is their pulse? What is the response of the average man in the street? How does the average man in the street understand that government is working? It is when he sees roads, he turns on his tap, water runs. Then he switches on light, there is power supply. Then he goes out to the shop, he can afford to buy items. Then his children can go to school, and at night he can sleep with his 2 eyes closed. They will understand that government is functional. When those things are not in place, there's no magic you will perform.
Okay.
They won't believe in you.
All right. I'm sure looking at what's on ground right now, it's, permit me to use the word impossible, to have the 2018 appropriation bill passed, before the end of this year. Now, a member of the Senate, talking about Senator Barnabas Gamadi, is suggesting that the proposed budget begins from the 1st of April 2018. So we give some time for the 2017 budget to be implemented to some extent, which he says was the promise that was made by the executive, to implement about 40% of that budget, first of all.
Yeah, I think that advice is a welcome one, because first and foremost, even at the inception of this very administration, when they came on board,
okay,
the last administration did not, exhaust the previous budget before the commencement of Buhari's administration. And that is why, while my colleague was talking, he said the budget started counting somewhere around April.
Yeah.
Now, for it to, normalize, the process, I think the suggestion of Senator.
So it now becomes an April.
Well,
April.
no. You can, yes, you understand me.
Right.
For it to be functional and for it to create a very good template, I think his suggestion is a welcome suggestion. You understand me? But however, I think we need to educate the Nigerian populace, especially on how they look at issues.
Okay.
The lecturer just said something. Everything in this country is being, seen from the political perspective. We don't go into the nitty-gritty of issues. For me as an individual, on this platform, I'm speaking as a professional. I'm not talking as a politician. Because if I want to talk as a politician, I'll bring the sentiment of my party.
Which I don't want that.
That's right. And that is why I have not talked anything about that. You see, we all have a role to play as Nigerians. Citizens, those in public office, civil servants, we all have a role to make Nigeria a great nation. I'll give an example. Are you aware, as a local government chairman, you are not a signatory to the account? You can only suggest. For instance, if I want to construct a road in my hometown, Igobazwa, I would raise a memo to the head of service, who is the hogger, and that memo will be taken to the Department of Works, where the professionals are expected to go and bring the bill of engineering and what have you. At the end of the day, they bring it back to me for approval. You understand me? Now, that is how budget is also being put in place. Every person who is responsible for playing its role and part to make a budget successful, functional, and reflect the yearnings and aspiration of the average Nigerian citizen should please play his part as expected.
Okay.
The legislative arm, I think, when the funding of the legislative houses in this country becomes a first line charge, it will go a long way to make the legislative or the legislator become more functional, because he does not need to seek approval to make use of the money that is expected for the legislators to carry out their oversight function. At this level, most states, they depend on the state governor to approve their funds, and this to a large extent tend to limit the extent of their performance.
Okay.
In the case of National Assembly, they've been able to fight their way to an extent where their finances is now independent, and that is why you see what is happening. Well, some persons want to see that, well, it will create some rancor. No, we expect Nigerian democracy to grow from stage to stage. You understand me?
Okay.
And when that is done, you see that things are properly being done.
Right.
So I want to appeal to the various states House of Assembly. There are certain things they must all come together and ensure that they fight for their financial independence to make their job more functional and more result.
Which is something they've rejected at some point. So let's just move on from that one. We're wrapping up right now. Quick question, and I need a straight answer. Does this government need to publish a report of implementation of the 2017 budget?
Frankly speaking, they don't have to go through that ordeal.
You think it's not necessary?
I'll call it an ordeal because, you see, if the government is performing, there is what we call quarterly reports. There is monthly briefing. We have Federal Executive Council meetings. All these are reports.
Okay.
It is what, you see, when you are talking of handover, you can ask, okay, do a condensed presentation. But on the average, I told you, I said, people in the street, they feel the pulse of government when they know things are working, when things are actually working.
All right.
Now, in this particular instance, the government will now, that will be politicizing it again. The government don't need to do that. If you are functioning, we will see it.
All right. So you're saying it's unnecessary?
It's not necessary. They should just keep, what I was going to say is that the government should declare emergency action in implementing the budget. What is preventing them from implementing the budget? Ask yourself that question. Have you asked that primary question? But if you are saying you have done 40%.
I'm going to leave you to answer that, but that will be some other time,
Okay,
because we're running out of time. Honorable Morrison, do you think the government needs to publish a report or put out a report as regards implementation, level of implementation of the 2017 budget?
Yeah, but at this time, I don't think that is really necessary. The time they will use for bringing out reports, they should use it for better things. Yeah. What we are saying is how to synergize, how to bring a harmonious, conclusion of passage of the 2018 budget. Areas that have gray issues should be sent back to the ministry or the appropriate agency for amendment. Areas that were lifted from the 2017 budget and placed into the 2018 budget should be expunged, you understand me? So that at the end of the day, there will be a compromise, and the most important thing is the Nigerian citizens get the result of a good governance, and that's it.
All right. Definitely, that's what we look forward to. Result of a good governance, making sure that things work out properly. Because if you ask me, 40%, first of all, I'm glad we have a lecturer here. It's not even a pass mark. So saying that
it's a pass, it's not a fail.
We should have 45 is okay.
45 is pass.
Manageable pass at that. So, saying that 40% should be implemented feels like this 2017 budget didn't even pass.
No, but I'll quickly say this before we go.
Okay.
Don't forget that last year budget started counting from April. So for you to now assess or evaluate,
there was a promise of 40%.
For you to assess or evaluate in March this present administration, let us wait from now till February, March. Okay. Then we can now be justified. Because this last budget, the 2017 budget, started counting around April.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming through this morning. All right, it's been fun right here, definitely. The aim is get things working and get it working properly. Nigeria is our own. It's our country. We don't have another place to turn to. If we're going to get better economically, if we're going to get better in every ramification, then it starts from getting it right, with documentation, facts, figures and all of that. And I'm sure that's what the National Assembly is pushing for. They actually think that most heads of ministries, departments, and agencies display a lackadaisical attitude towards the defense of their budget. And that's a big issue, something that needs to be addressed. I think a whole lot of people needs to be called, to answer for all of this. That's how we wrap it up on this discussion, but do remember, we need your comments, so keep it coming via Twitter handle at ITV Radio NG. Use the hashtag TMI. Let's know what you think as regards this discussion this morning. So stay tuned, TMI continues.